Okay. Good morning. It's good to be back at the office today. I'm feeling better and ready to get back to work. Today, I'd like to speak about the domestic abuse bill that we have submitted to the legislature. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds and I are joined by Acting Commissioner of Public Safety, Roxanne Ryan, and by the Director of Research for the Department of Corrections, Letty Prell. Both of these people have been instrumental in helping to draft and shape the bill that we have put forward to help end domestic violence in our state. I also want to welcome a very important person who has joined us today, Sheila Lynch. Sheila is the mother of Teresa Ann Lynch Moore, a woman whose life was tragically taken due to an incident involving domestic abuse. Teresa Ann, a young, bright woman who served in our state's Air National Guard, has served as an inspiration for the creation of this new policy. And I thank her mother, Sheila, for joining us today. The crime of domestic violence is one of horrifying brutality. Often the victims live in a state of constant fear. By allowing this offense to go unchecked, it can create generations of abusive domestic partners who don't know how to resolve conflicts without abuse, manipulation, bullying, and violence. In 2014, there were 2,665 people convicted of domestic abuse in Iowa. Of these 2,665, there were 71 third offense domestic abusers. This is unacceptable. The bill we are proposing, ensures that repeat offenders are treated as a more serious threat to both the victims and the public. Our domestic abuse bill has several components that work to identify those abusers that pose a significant risk and focuses on ways to stop their future abusive behavior. One important component is to increase mandatory minimums. Punishment for a third offense of domestic abuse assault would be tripled from 1 year to 3 years in prison. There are other crimes that are closely associated with domestic abuse that, if the minimum is raised, will help prevent further abuse as well. These include a third conviction for harassment and a third offense for stalking. Under our bill, habitual offenders would serve at least 85% of their sentence and only receive earned time credit if they are participating in treatment programs. We are increasing sanctions when protective orders are violated by the offender. We are working to make sure that we properly identify the threat that offenders pose. For this, we increase use of risk assessments so that the courts and corrections officers better know the type of person they're dealing with. And now I'd like to invite Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds to the podium to give you more information.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor Branstad. And I, too, am happy to be back to work. And I'd like to thank Iowans for their generous well wishes last week. It meant a great deal to both the governor and myself. As the governor pointed out, it's time for Iowa to get serious on domestic violence, and our bill does that. We know our laws can provide better justice for the victims of domestic violence and as well as better protection. Offenders who are high risk on court-ordered evaluations, as well as those who have shown criminal patterns of domestic abuse, are the type of offender that we need to address. The advances in technology have led to accurate electronic GPS monitoring systems that can be used as a tool to keep victims safe from future abuse, harassment, or stalking. Under our plan to protect victims, if a high-risk offender is being released on probation or parole, the use of technology would be at our disposal. Our bill also will greatly expand the use of this technology by providing guidelines to the courts on appropriate crimes for which GPS or other electronic monitoring at the time should be used. A final aspect of our legislation is the use of treatment on those individuals who have committed crimes related to domestic abuse. We need to ensure that perpetrators are held accountable and that they receive treatment and that the treatment is meaningful and has data-driven results. The Iowa Department of Corrections has been a pioneer in a domestic abuse treatment model that is showing positive results. The model will soon be a standard at community-based and institutional correction facilities across our state. We believe this legislation properly addresses the issue of domestic abuse and assault in our state, and hopefully with a strong, focused, and strategic law such as this, we can go a long ways in preventing future tragedies such as the one that was suffered by Sheila Lynch's daughter, Treesan. And at this time, I'd like to invite our acting public safety director, Roxanne Ryan, to the podium to give you some more details. Roxanne?
Thank you. This is a carefully crafted bill that addresses the most serious offenders in ways that are most likely to hold them accountable. We can increase the amount of time that people are spending if they are assessed to be high risk. We can use risk assessments effectively to be able to make decisions pre-trial and post-trial. We can use those risk assessments as well in developing treatment programs and in using the treatment programs that have been developed by the Department of Corrections. So for those of us in law enforcement, this is a good step forward because we are able to use our resources most effectively and monitor the actions of people who we have assessed to have the greatest risk of harm to individuals and to the general public. So this is a very carefully crafted bill. We are holding offenders accountable in prison. We are holding offenders accountable before they go to trial, and we are helping the law enforcement officials in the state to be able to use their investigative resources as effectively as possible to be able to keep people safe, both the individuals who are targeted by the domestic abusers and the general public that is also affected. We are focused primarily on the third offense, domestic abuse assault, the stalking, the felony stalking statute, and first-degree harassment. Those are the types of crimes that are typically occurring in the cases in which there is the highest risk in domestic violence cases, and those are the cases in which we most need to use our resources effectively. The progress that the Department of Corrections and the Board of Parole have made in risk assessment helps us tremendously in using our law enforcement resources as effectively as we possibly can. This bill enhances that ability, and we certainly strongly support this kind of change in the law.
Okay, Letty.
I'd like to talk about two provisions a little bit more to help end the cycle of violence in families. This bill ensures the widespread and consistent use of electronic monitoring based on risk. We have GPS monitoring that can establish zones into which the offender cannot go. And we have the ability to respond immediately to those violations and to keep the victim safe. This bill also requires domestic abuse treatment in prison as well as in the community, and that is new. For third offense domestic abuse, earned time will be suspended if the offender refuses to participate in a domestic abuse program while in prison. They will serve longer in prison if they do not cooperate with treatment. And our new domestic abuse program that was developed by the University of Iowa in cooperation with our community-based corrections offices is a promising new program that in pilot reduced the rate of violent reoffending by 40%. And we are deploying this statewide.
I want to thank Roxanne and Letty and Sheila for joining us. We'd open it to your questions on this subject first. Sheila, I think she's willing to answer a question.
What are we to take from your presentation today? What do you want to hear from?
I have been pushing for GPS monitoring weeks since the trial of my daughter's murderer. This bill goes beyond what I even hoped for. If this bill had been in effect when my daughter was being stalked by the man she was trying to divorce, I believe with all my heart that she would still be here. I cannot go backwards, but I can certainly go forward. And this bill takes the electronic monitoring that I was pushing for, and it goes much farther than that. It makes a protective order more than a piece of paper. It puts behind that protective order respect for the victim and authority and control for the police department that can back up that protective order. When my daughter was killed, I heard more times than I want to count that a protective order is just a piece of paper. And with this legislation, it will no longer just be a piece of paper. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights started out as a piece of paper. It is backed up by principles, by authority, by truths, by respect, and so will the protective order with this bill. And this is more than I even dreamed of. And I know my daughter would be excited, just as excited as I am.
How do you spell your name? Can you spell your name?
Sheila Lynch, and it's Sheila Lynca. Treesan. It's capital Trese, capital ANN, and it's written as one word. She was very, very protective of that name too. She had a protective order against her. Yes, when we found out what was going on, we got her away from him, her and her little baby, away from him. We had a protective order, and we had her for one last wonderful month. We did not realize that he was stalking her. He was using different cars. So we were not able to track him. He stalked her, followed her, and I think everybody knows the rest of it, but he kidnapped her outside of a Target parking lot, in the parking lot, forced her into a car with his gun, took her back to the apartment that she fled from in fear of her life, brutally assaulted her, and then killed her with a deer rifle. If this legislation had been in effect, first of all, she would have known that he was within the distance he was not supposed to be, that he was violating that protective order. She would not have left that Target store. She would have stayed with public where she would have been safe. And the police would have known that he was also violating that protective order, and he could have been arrested, and that could have been the end of that part. I know there's an emotional side of domestic violence as well as the legal side. My daughter was struggling with that part, but she had the support of her family and her friends. She was regaining her self-esteem, which he had torn out from under her, and she was coming back to us. The last day of her life, that Veterans Day, she called me, and I've never heard her as happy on that morning with her son. She planned on spending the day with her son, and tragically, it did not end that way. But this bill, to me, represents respect and honor for my daughter and for all the victims of domestic violence, and they go across the board. There's no boundaries. There's no boundaries. Culture, race, financial, educational, it does not matter. There are no boundaries for domestic violence. And this bill matches and exceeds everything I hoped for in my daughter's honor. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this bill goes through, whatever I can do. And I've already got people saying that they'll support it in any way they can support it, friends and family and people across the state and in the state of Texas where I'm from. They're all pushing to do whatever they can. If I am invited to, I will be, yes. Anybody that wants to know my personal reasons for passing this bill, I will let them know. I can't go backwards, but I can go forward. And every victim that's saved by this bill personally will be in respect and honor for my daughter who lost her life. So it means a lot to me. No, I'm in Iowa now. I've been in Iowa since my daughter was killed. Oh, I live in Nevada. Nevada. I live and work in Nevada.
Well, thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Dr. Ryan, could you speak to kind of the mechanics of the GPS tracking, how it would work?
Letty is probably the better one.
Why don't you come up here, Lynn?
Give us your name.
Yes, my name is Letty Prell. I'm the Director of Research with the Iowa Department of Corrections. Letty is spelled Lettie. My last name is Prell, Prell. I'm the Director of Research,
Department of Corrections.
Iowa Department of Corrections.
So how would this work? The offender would have a GPS device, and the victim would too, and then it would ping when they're too close to each other?
The most common use of the electronic monitoring would be that the offender would wear the device. There would be exclusion zones set up, which would send an alert to our central command for electronic monitoring and alert our staff of the breach. We then phone the victim. We work with the victim to develop a good safety plan for when such incidences might occur. And then we immediately deploy our staff or law enforcement to the offender's location.
What would be an example of exclusion?
The victim's home, block, the immediate area around the victim's home. Perhaps a workplace area where the victim works.
Are there similar examples in other states? Your modeling examples and success stories?
There is a wide body of research now that does document that use of electronic monitoring and global positioning system technology reduces reoffending among offenders.
Is there also some research, I seem to have read something about this focus on the highest risk offenders? Are they modeling this after what other states are doing on that too? And you can't follow all of them, so you figure out who is the highest risk and really focus on them. Are you following some other state in that aspect of this?
Iowa is one of the leaders in corrections policy and community-based corrections policy. Our strategic plan specifically has goals of focusing our resources on the highest risk offender because we know we can reduce the reoffending. Right now, the Iowa Board of Parole and our community-based corrections offices use the same violence risk scale that predicts the likelihood of new violent crime among offenders generally. We're going to test and make sure that this is working well for the subpopulation of domestic abusers. And there are other tools that the judicial branch, and we are partnering with the judicial branch in their research and continuing activities for domestic abuse.
Based on historical data, do you have any idea how many offenders this might, how many GPS
71.
Yes, every year, about 71 offenders are convicted of third offense domestic abuse assault. They are largely sent to prison, and on release, these would be probably one of the populations on which GPS technology would be used.
Representative Baltimore, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee of the House, expressed reservations about the GPS first because he says that some offenders may not know where the person is. That they may go to the grocery store, they may not know that the person that they're not supposed to have contact with is in the grocery store. What do you say to critics who raise concerns about those?
We have the ability to phone the offender when we think that they are in an area that may be problematic. I am not an expert myself in our GPS command center, but we can provide additional information about that.
Exactly would be subject to GPS tracking and from stalking protection.
We would do a risk assessment and have the ability to use the GPS monitoring consistently based on the risk, much like we do today with the sex offender population.
So if you see protection of people, just think about this case. He wasn't a third offense, right? It was a high risk.
We have the ability for people under our supervision to, based on their risk and not on their offense, we can deploy this technology.
So does that increase it from 171 cases that you mentioned, that it's be a much harder cost for individual?
Yes, it could.
Is there a cost at this point in terms of, is there, a general estimation of how much maybe additional, would there be an extra cost?
GPS technology costs about $3 per offender per day, a little over $3 per offender per day. And in many cases, the offenders themselves pay.
I would also point out, and this came up in the budget hearing with the corrections and parole board, because of the risk assessments that parole board is doing, and because of the collaboration between corrections and the parole board, we have actually increased paroles and seen a reduction in recidivism at the same time. That is very unusual, and I think that's a good example of how the present system is really working. And this is just a way to improve upon that and protect victims of domestic abuse.
Is there an overall cost associated with the bill, both for additional monitoring and for longer?
I'm sure there will be a fiscal note that will, it's not a huge cost. We think that the benefit certainly outweighs the cost. And by doing a better job of identifying the low-risk offenders that can be released and keeping those people that are high risk in longer is in not only in the interest of public safety, but is also economically wise.
One of the victims advocates also expressed concern that they're dealing with violent people and increase the penalty, and then others increase penalty just might be the matter.
Well,
More violent.
I don't buy that. These people are dangerous people, and they are people that are threatening others. And what we're trying to do is make sure that when we have protective order, that it is meaningful and that we have a system to follow up and prevent tragedies from occurring.
How long do they have to be supervised? How is it determined that they spend enough time?
Well, actually, what it does is it triples. Right now, they automatically get this, earn this, what's good time or whatever. And this says for those people that are third offense, domestic abusers, that unless they're in a treatment program, they're not going to automatically get that. A lot of people don't understand that anyway. Somebody is sentenced to 3 years in prison, automatically it's less than a year and a half.
Related public safety issues, there are more violent predators who are housed in a facility, and your Department of Human Services officials say you're going to find nursing homes.
Well, I don't know that there be nursing homes. I think what we need to do is we need to look at what is the best placement for each individual and determine that. The problem we've got with both Clarinda and with Mount Pleasant is I think at Clarinda, the psychiatrist is retiring, and we haven't been able to hire one at Mount Pleasant. Neither one of those are accredited facilities. We prefer to have people in secure and safe and appropriate facilities. And
Move those 4 people to a safer facility.
well, I guess the department will make a determination of what they think is the best and most appropriate placement, both for those individuals, for their treatment, and to protect the public safety.
Why does this issue come to your attention now?
Why has this issue come to our attention now?
It's been a serious issue for a while. I
Well,
wondered why
people
it's-
like Sheila have stepped forward, and I give her a lot of credit for courage and for wanting to do the right thing in memory of her daughter. And this is an example of the kind of tragedies that we don't want to occur again in the state of Iowa. So we think this legislation, and I want to thank everybody from public safety to corrections that's helped us in drafting the legislation. I think we have a very well thought out piece of legislation that's been drafted. We intend to work with both houses of the legislature. I think there is broad bipartisan support for this concept, and we're very hopeful it can be approved this year.
Question, what do you make of Romney's pullout? Do you think the poll indicates that Walker, do you see Walker as the front runner right now?
Well, I don't know that you can say 15% makes you the front runner. First of all, we have a lot of really capable, quality candidates that are interested in running. I want to encourage them to come to Iowa and come here often and give the voters of Iowa a chance to see who has the best vision and plan for the country. But I'm excited that we do have a very strong slate of candidates. And of course, I've already visited with some of them to encourage them to come and participate in that Ag Summit on March 7th. I'm very hopeful we're going to see a good broad-based participation in that and other subsequent events.
Do you think that the Democrats will be hurt by the fact that Hillary doesn't seem to have any significant opposition?
Well, if you look at the last election, when the Democrats didn't have a primary for United States Senate, for governor, and for a 3rd District Congress, I think it definitely hurt them. Because I think Iowa voters are pretty discerning, and they want to meet the candidates, they want to ask them the tough questions. And if somebody doesn't have any opponent and they're not willing to debate, I don't think that's a helpful thing. So, a lot of people don't like primaries. I've been through a lot of them in my recent elections, and I think primaries are actually probably a healthy thing because it gives the voters a choice. And as a candidate, it means, you sharpen your skills by debating and traveling the state extensively. So I've always tried to encourage candidates to, number one, go to all 99 counties, participate in debates, and answer questions from the public. I think that's a healthy thing, and I think it's good for our state and for our country.
Governor, can you speak to the development we heard last week on road funding and the potential here for a 10% increase?
We have had a number of meetings with legislative leaders. We're going to continue to work with legislative leaders on this. We believe that we need to have bipartisan support to provide the needed funding for the road use tax fund to meet the transportation needs of our state. I have a major infrastructure initiative for both broadband and for roads and bridges, and we're very optimistic this year we can take action on both of those subjects.
Governor, since this is the first time that we've seen you since you got ill, two things. A, do you regret not listening to your wife?
Yes. That's an easy one. I've learned my lesson, and yes, I should have listened to my wife. I should not have gone to work on Monday.
But secondarily, the health professionals always tell us if you're really sick, don't go to work.
Yeah.
And you're in a very public position where you're in rooms like this with a bunch of people. So, do you kind of regret going through that by trying to work through everything?
I've been sick over the weekend, and I got a lot of rest, and so I thought I'm better. And I'm a workaholic. I like to work, and I don't like to miss. I don't. Once I made a commitment, I like to try to find a way to get there, even if there's a snowstorm or whatever. So, but I also think you need to use some common sense. And my wife is one of these people that has a lot of common sense, and I want to listen to her. And she also has some medical background. She was a medical assistant. So her advice was what I should have followed.
Senate Democrats are again going to pursue legislation to expand
funding in Iowa? Do you think they can afford that? Is that something you could support?
Well, I think Iowa provides more funding for preschool than most states. And I would like to see us instead target the resources to the needy. Right now, it's a freebie for everybody. And I think if they want to expand it, then I would be willing to look at a proposal that I made when I first became governor, and that is to target those resources to meet the kids from families that have critical financial needs.
And just the other thing that I would add to that are there are communities that are doing a great job of a public-private partnership and really doing well to serve the students with preschool. Dubuque is a community that really is doing some great things, and so it's in our best interest to understand what they're doing and then try to scale that across the state of Iowa and make those known to other communities.
I would say, in some communities, even smaller communities like Lake Mills have been doing this for years. When my kids were little and before I was governor, we lived in Lake Mills. They went to preschool there, and they also, and they had preschool in the Lutheran church, which was right across the street from the school. And they also had organizations that raised money to help families that couldn't afford to pay the preschool costs. So there are already communities that are doing significant things there.
Governor, back on your illness, did you feel like an ambulance ride or hospitalization was appropriate?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm most appreciative to all of the healthcare professionals and everybody that assisted. I think they did a wonderful job. And, you know, I would have preferred not to have to spend the night in the hospital, not to have all the tests, but out of precaution, they ran all these tests, and I did have the responsibility of spending the night in the hospital. And hopefully I've learned a lesson about not going to work when you're not feeling well so that we don't have to go through that again.
You don't sound 100%.
No, I still have a little bit of a raspy voice. I'm, you know, the doctor said you're doing a lot better, but you're gonna need to continue to be careful. And I still have a little bit of a raspy voice, and I'm going to continue to drink a lot of water.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.